There's a section of what remains of Edith Finch I find weird, in a good way. It's a portion of the game where you enter Molly's room and find out how she died, or rather, how Molly describes her death in her diary. It all starts when her mom sends her to bed without any dinner. Molly, who's unable to sleep, begins to eat anything she can lay her hands on. First, she eats her pet gerbil's food. Then, she eats the holly berries on the window. And next, she begins to eat toothpaste. This is where things start to get very weird. In a bout of hunger, Molly turns into a cat and tries to eat a bird she sees through her room window. Then she turns into an owl, then a shark, then a literal sea monster, hunting animals all the while. Then as the sea monster, she returns back to her room, turns back into a human and writes in her diary. This is what she wrote. And suddenly, I was me again. I held my breath for a very long time, but I couldn't hear anything. I think it's waiting for me to fall asleep. But it's not going to wait much longer. It needs to feed. And we both know I will be delicious. The game pretty much leads you to believe that Molly dies after being killed by the monster under her bed. But if we look closely, remember the holly berries that Molly ate in the beginning of the video? It turns out those berries are very poisonous when consumed in large quantities. And even though holly berries can't cause hallucinations, I think it's safe to assume that Molly died as a result of the poison she got from consuming these holly berries. I honestly can't tell what is more sad. A little girl getting killed by a sea monster under her bed, or a little girl unknowingly ingesting poison because she was hungry because her mom sent her to bed without any dinner. Please feed your kids. Regardless, the point is, Molly is an unreliable narrator. Molly's account of her own death was basically a mislead. The game never tells us how or exactly how Molly dies, so it's up to us to figure it out by ourselves. It's like another layer of immersion. It's kind of like when you're trying to put a puzzle together, but all the puzzle pieces you are given are wrong. And that's what I love about the unreliable narrator trope, especially in video games. So before we continue, what is an unreliable narrator? According to a simple Google search, an unreliable narrator is a character in a story that cannot be fully trusted to tell the truth. This means that the accounts or events might be biased, distorted, or deliberately misleading. Now we have a working definition of what an unreliable narrator is. We're going to be looking at unreliable narrators in video games because I find them more interesting. Why, you ask? Well, the narrator trope in books and movies tend to make a narrative feel more nuanced and interesting, but I feel like video games take it to another level, because in video games, narrators tend to have an agenda and motivations of their own, almost as if they were their own character in the narrative and not just a disembodied voice telling you what's happening in the plots, however unreliably. Let me explain this further. Books and movies do not have multiple endings. At least not any book or movie I know. So the narrators of those mediums cannot bring about any conclusion to that narrative because that story has already been written. But video game narrators have the ability to manipulate you into bringing about a conclusion that they want. A great example of this is the narrator from the next game we're going to talk about.
You're on a path in the woods, and at the end of that path is a cabin. And in the basement of that cabin is a princess. You're here to slay her. If you don't, it will be the end of the world.
Slay the Princess is a visual novel style choose your own adventure game where you play as a nameless protagonist who is straight up commanded by the narrator to slay the princess or else the world ends. Also, there are going to be light spoilers for this game, so if you really want to play the game for yourself and you haven't, just skip to the timestamp shown on the screen now. Anyway, so right from the bat, this narrator is looking sketchy as hell. This game is very dense and I'm going to find it difficult to talk about it with you guys because there's so much to this game. I think I'm probably going to have to make a separate video about this game in the future. So I've decided I'm just going to narrate how your first playthrough is going to look like when you start this game. Your first playthrough is going to look something like this. You find yourself in the middle of the woods. Then a voice in your head, the narrator, tells you to go to a cabin in a clearing so you can kill the princess so as to prevent the end of the world or something. You get to the cabin. You find a single knife on top of a table in a sparsely furnished room. The narrator tells you to take the knife, but being the main character that you are, you refuse. After all, you can't let any of your comrades die. And it just occurred to you, instead of slaying the princess, you're going to save the princess. I wonder where you got that idea from. Anyway, you go down to the basement to try and save the princess, while the narrator complains the whole time. And it turns out the princess is actually kind of nice. Why would anyone try to slay her? The narrator is obviously trying to stop you from getting with the princess, which is kind of sad. As it turns out, the princess is chained to the wall. So you go upstairs to try and find the key or something to help her escape from her chains. But as you start heading upstairs, the basement door slams shut and is locked from the outside. So you come back and tell the princess the bad news. And then the princess does what anybody else would do and literally tries to bite her own hand off. So long story short, you cut the princess's hand off and try to escape then. Then the narrator literally possesses you and tries to make you kill the princess. You resist him, obviously, and then the princess takes the knife from your hands and mercy kills you. This freaking game, bro. And that's just one of the endings. Obviously, there's a bigger narrative with bigger themes at play here, spanning across the multiple timelines and playthroughs you play. Each playthrough ending when either the protagonist or the princess dies. This game deals with a lot of heavy themes, such as the acceptance or rejection of change and morality. And I'm not going to talk about them in this video because I'm not smart enough to talk about them. Having said that, I think I would be remiss if I didn't point out that the princess is not always this pleasant. Actually, other versions of the princess can be very far from pleasant. As a matter of fact, I'm going to make a list of the kinds of princess you might see during your playthroughs. We have Asshole Princess, Stabby Princess, Apex Predator Princess, Ghost Princess, Nightmare Fuel Princess. Actually, this one still gives me nightmares to this day, and whatever this is. Needless to say, this is a 5-star game. Not only is it very entertaining, it's one of those games that make you feel like you've become a better person when you finish it. And I really appreciate the art style and the art direction. Being an artist myself, those kind of things really appeal to me. This game's masterful storytelling shows the epitome of an unreliable and even at times devious narrator. For this next game, the narrator takes more of a back seat and kind of controls things from the background. Unlike Slay the Princess, this narrator isn't very active in the narrative, but influences the narrative by interacting directly with the protagonist, you. Yes, that's right, you. There are many playable characters in Paranormal Sight's The 7 Mysteries of Honjo, but the main protagonist of this story is you, the player. This story is better played through blind, so if you haven't played this game, I'm going to leave a timestamp up on the screen here so you can skip to it if you really want to play the game for yourself, which I highly recommend. Paranormal Sight is a visual novel style game that blends the genres of horror, thriller, mystery, and even comedy in one perfectly delivered package. It's mostly a detective horror game though. The whole story takes place in the city of Sumida Ward in Tokyo, Japan in the late 20th century. The whole premise of the game surrounds an occult practice known as the Rite of Resurrection. Basically, the Rite of Resurrection is a rite whereby cause bearers, people who have been chosen by resentful spirits, can bring back loved ones by taking the souls of other people. In a nutshell, they are sacrificing other people to bring back their loved ones. In the game, there are at least 7 cause bearers, each of them corresponding to one of the 7 mysteries of Honjo. And by the way, Honjo is just the southern part of the city of Sumida World. Each character wields a specific curse that can only be activated when the opponent carries out the conditions for the curse. So basically, curse bearers can only kill people who carry out the conditions of their curse. This makes a wildly interesting dialogue when two curse bearers interact, as they try to figure out each other's curses without triggering the curse of the other one. For example, there's a character in this game, and the condition for his curse to be activated is if somebody lies or intentionally tries to deceive him. I find this very interesting. Speaking of interesting, I find the whole cast of characters in this game very interesting, but the character I find the most interesting is the storyteller. But for the sake of this video, let's call him the narrator. Remember when I said that the whole premise of this game surrounds the rite of resurrection? Well, most of the plot involves an investigation being carried out on Sumida City concerning a string of murders that were obviously carried out by curse bearers. But which curse bearers? Look, this game has a brilliant story, but it's the even more brilliant meta execution that has me in utter disbelief. The game breaks the fourth wall multiple times in really creative ways. It's hard for me to maintain my train of thoughts, but just stay with me here. The game basically ends in a tragedy. This is a tragic story. So the storyteller basically thanks you for playing the game and bids you farewell. But before he sends you away, he hints that something can actually be done about this tragedy and gives you a clue. This clue starts a chain of events that leads to the biggest plot twist I've ever seen in any media I've consumed to this day. There's so much I want to tell you about this game, but I feel like it would be unfair robbing you of the experience. So if you haven't played this game, I highly recommend that you do so. At that point where I found out the true intention of the narrator or the storyteller in this game, it was at that moment I decided I was going to make this video. Because in video games, narrators can be so much more. They're not just disembodied voices telling you what to do or where to go, or maybe lying to you once in a while. They can be allies, they can be friends, they can even be the antagonists of the story. If you're still here, thanks for sticking around, listening to my rants about random things in games I find interesting. I really wanted to make this video for a long time, so thank you so much for watching it even to the end. If you found it even vaguely entertaining or interesting, consider smashing the like button and consider subscribing, because I have a lot of obscure ideas about video games and even media in general that I would like to make videos about in the future. So that's the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.